which is the first na mga lessons within your first na module, Module 1, which is on the introduction to biochemical reactions or the redox reactions. So before you understand the term redox, or baka nakalimutan na ninyo kung paano intindihin ang redox, so let's start with a review on atoms, elements, compounds, and isotopes. Kasi you will need to understand that first dahil sa pabalik-balik yan siya na topic hanggang sa quarter 4. Okay, so for this lesson, we will be learning the fundamentals on chemistry that are used in biology. So yun siya ang gagamitin natin. For example, ano ba yung chemical compounds that are used frequently in biology? Ano bang mga principles behind the bonding ng mga ng elements or compounds in biological compounds. Okay, so yun ang ating i-discuss today. So most of our lesson for this one is nakakasentro siya sa ating biomolecules. So we have your biomolecules such as your carbohydrates, your proteins, lipids, and you have your nucleic acids. So ang portion kung saan na maintindihan din ninyo kung why water is very important for organisms, for living organisms, is because it is yung tinuturing natin as the universal solvent. Isa din siya sa mga may stable, pinaka-distinct ang kanyang boiling and freezing na temperatures. So isa yun siya, and it actually is explained in its structure. So mamaya titingnan natin yung bonding niya din. So sa next natin na mga slides. Right? So meron din tayong for a separate na lesson which is for students who will be taking medical degrees or degrees which are related with medicine, like the allied health na sciences. You will have a separate na lesson for biomolecules. So doon i-discuss ang differences between the ano to siya ang structures ng glucose and cellulose, anong differences between them, ano yung alpha and beta na mga structures nila, ano yung Fisher and Haworth na projection for carbohydrates. So that's a separate na discussion for students who will be taking biology-related na degrees sa college. Okay, so you will be posting a schedule for that later on. It's either this week or next week. So dahil sa next week is mag-start na ang mga regular na face-to-face natin na classes, and we won't be able to see you. So I'm maybe sending you as magsasend na lang ako ng recorded na lesson sa Google Meet, then i-upload ko na lang at ibibigay ko sa inyo ang link. Alright? So, for this one, let's start with the atoms and its subatomic particles. So, review muna tayo. Ano yung mga atoms natin, ano yung mga subatomic particles natin. So, for this one, let's review ano yung particle properties. So, meron tayo yung data natin that we've na-discuss ninyo kay Sir Sarah noon, that a proton has a positive charge, an electron has a negative charge, and your neutron actually has no charge at all. And they have different masses. So, the heaviest na natin na mass natin is actually the proton and the neutrons. And the one which is the lightest one is actually your electron. So the one that is found outside your nucleus is only your electron. And siya yung ginagamit natin for photosynthesis, yung sa electron transport chain natin. And we have the electron transport chain sa ating cellular respiration, which is after the Krebs cycle, okay, for eukaryotes. So yun ang importance ng study of this one. Kaya sinasali talaga siya sa mga textbooks. Sa mga may textbooks dyan, you can open it on the first unit, first chapter of your textbook. You will see that there is a discussion regarding these topics dyan. Alright? So, we also need to understand, review muna natin, that they are usually, yung protons and neutrons natin are usually in your nucleus, and your electrons are found outside of the nucleus in clouds, or tinatawag natin the orbitals. So they actually jump from one orbital to another, and they do not have a very specific location. They just have, kaya tinatawag siya na parang cloud, kasi they move throughout those na areas which is outside of your nucleus. Okay. So for your carbon atom, for example, dahil the carbon atom is actually may atomic number na 6. So we will have 6 na electrons, then we have 6 protons and 6 neutrons. So dahil it's a stable element, but stable siya, but it will be attracting electrons from other mga from other na mga atoms. So it's most likely able to attract dahil most of them will be attracting other electrons to fill up the 8 kasi that's their favorite na stable na state. Okay? So and we have to remember then that we have this one. Meron kayong exercises nito in your modules. You have your subatomic particle na values. You have their examples of sets of atoms that you are going to solve as part of your exercises. Para ma-review nyo lang yung topic because you really need to review it para hindi kayo mabigla sa lesson on redox, okay, reduction and oxidation reaction. So you need to remember that the value of your mass number. Okay, wait lang. Sino medyo pwede pa-mute ang mga mics? Okay. So we have to you have to remember that the mass number is actually equal to the number of your protons and your neutrons. So you have together, that's your mass number. And you have your atomic number is equal to the number of your electrons or your protons. So usually they are written as this form. So meron tayong form na ganito, which is, this is your X, it represents as your element na symbol. So for example, you have here your chlorine. This is its mass number. The mass number is 35, and you have your atomic number as 17. So they are usually written as that way. So you just need to remember that kasi you have to remember also that there are also isotopes. So tandaan ninyo, hindi kasi sa biology kasi class, hindi kasi lang ordinary atoms or compounds ang ating dinediscuss. We will also discuss isotopes, especially in quarter 4, which is human anatomy and physiology. So you have to also remember ano yung mga isotopes natin, which is hindi natin na-discuss dyan sa inyong module. But I'll just insert it today. So the isotopes that you have to remember commonly that are used for living organisms is actually the hydrogen, you have the cobalt, barium, the carbon, and the radium. So usually they are used for medical na diagnostic exams. Your cobalt and barium are usually ginagamit yan siya for radiation, and including your radium. Sa mga anthropologic na studies about living organisms, so we use carbon-14, which is the radioisotope of your carbon. So siya yung ginagamit natin. So carbon is only meron tayo yung mass niya na which is 12, but ang sa kanya is nagiging siyang carbon-14 because of nadagdagan siya ng neutrons. Okay, so That's your most important na mga isotopes for living organisms. Tandaan nyo yan dahil babalik yan siya by quarter 4. Ito siya ng mga topics on isotopes. Alright, so balik tayo. Okay, so let's go to ano yung mga isotopes natin. So ano bang nasa isotope? So it has the same number of protons but a different number of your neutrons. So yung sinabi ko kanina na mas marami yung kanyang neutrons than its protons. So kaya siya ang normal kasi na number lang ng protons for a carbon is 12, but for a radioisotope na carbon, the more kasi siya nagiging unstable kapag mas marami siyang neutrons. If you remember from your study sa Earth Sciences, you have there the paano naggagawa yung mga elements after the Big Bang. So you have the first element that is present in the yung sa cosmic na microwave natin na theory. We have there the hydrogen and helium. So you have there the presence of your additional na mga neutrons na nagdadagdagdagdagdag sa isa't isa hanggang sa nakagawa sila ng heavier elements. Okay, so those are discussions which is part na ng inyong Earth Sciences, but it's still also a part of the lessons which is included in biochemistry. Babalikan ulit natin yan na topic pagdating natin ng quarter 3, which is your evolution. Big Bang kasi is part of your evolution. Alright? So, ano kayo ng systematics and evolution sa quarter 3. So, let's have this one example. Kasi carbon kasi is very important for living organisms. It forms as the backbone for all living organisms. So, you have to remember this part. Okay, so you have here an example of your isotopes of carbon. Tinatawag natin silang isotopes because these are the different forms of your carbon. So meron tayo yung carbon natin na 12, we have the carbon 13, and we have the carbon 14. Just remember class, ganito, the carbon 12 is the most abundant in nature sa living organisms, including anywhere we can find, meron tayong carbon. Anything that has life has carbon. Okay, tandaan natin yan ha. So, but we have sometimes mga ganito, which is your other isotopes, the radioisotope. The radioisotope is considered this one, the carbon 14. And dahil sa it's a radioisotope, it is highly unstable and it decays rapidly. But ang decaying kasi niya is meron siya tayong yung ano natin is it's measured in half-life. So it's in several years or millions of years. Yun siya ang kanyang half-life. So ganun ang measurement niyan. But here we notice that you have here sa nucleus niya, meron tayong 6 protons and stable siya throughout. Meron tayong 6 protons for all isotopes. And you notice that as you go up sa kanyang isotope, ang kanyang neutron, the neutron number also increases. So you have 6, 7 for carbon 13. You have 8 neutrons for carbon 14. Okay? So ganun ang kanyang and you notice also that the number of your electrons are actually they're also the same, fairly the same. So the number of protons and neutrons and electrons are actually the same all throughout your isotopes, but it's the number of neutrons that are actually increasing as you go up the samples for your isotopes. So ganun ang ating isotopes na example. Right. So let's have this one. So hanapin natin. So which of the following isotopes, atoms are isotopes of each other? So let's have this one. Balikan natin kung ano yung nasa itaas, ano yung nasa ibaba. The upper one is actually the mass number and we have the atomic number here below. So the atomic number, balikan natin, ano yung meaning ng atomic number natin. So the atomic number is equal to the number of your electrons and your protons, and the mass number is equal to the number of your protons and the neutrons. Okay, so alin dito ang isotopes of each other? So ang titingnan natin is that it's sino ang the same element. So we have 1 and 2. Is it correct na number na for their mass number? Is it correct na meron tayong carbon 12 and carbon 14? Okay, so as we discussed earlier, so we have here carbon 12 and also we have here carbon 14. So these are the isotopes of each other. We have 1 and 3. Right? So yan ang sagot for this question. Okay, so for this one, let's have a review. Okay, sino pang maka-review kung mag-count ng mga atoms? Okay, this is important for your lesson sa entire na quarter, which is for this quarter. So, alin dito ang mas may maraming nitrogen atoms? So, we can count from 1 to 7. Tingnan natin kung alin sa kanila. So we have from number 1, we have only 1. We have from number 2, we have, this is times 3. This is 3. So this is multiplied inside here, dito sa loob. Okay, so this is 3 for number 2. This is, for number 3, we have N here, we have nitrogen here, and we have 2 outside. So that is multiplied to 1 here. So meron tayong 2. So nitrogen has 2 atoms here. Here is meron tayong isa lang kasi wala tayong nakasulat. Kapag wala yan siyang nakasulat, that's only 1. Then you have here 2 dito. Then you have also 1 and we have 2. Dalawa yan siya. And we have here 2. So alin tayo mention ng number 3? So we have only your number 2. So this has the most number of nitrogen atoms. Okay? So you can review it on your own. I'll be giving you the copy later sa PDF na ito. Okay, so let's have this one complete the following sentences. Ano ba ang isasagot natin sa mga blank na ito? Okay, so we have here for number 1, we have the neutral atoms. So meron ba silang positive, negative, or neutral na charge? Okay, so dahil sa neutral sila, they don't have any charges. So the answer for this one has 0 charge or no charge. Okay, so we have for number 2, a charged atom is called a what? Okay, but yung for your lessons, we always mention from here on out, we have the term ions. Okay, so we have a cation. Tandaan nyo lang ang mnemonic na para matandaan nyo siya. Cat, dahil may T. Okay, so it's a plus na sign. So that's a positively charged na ion. So that is a positively charged ion. So mas marami siyang proton. Then we have a negatively charged na ion, which is your anion. Tandaan nyo lang yung N because it's negative. Okay, so yun siya ang ginagamit namin na mnemonics sa chemistry, sa nutrition dati. Okay, so we have that. A charged ion is called a ion. Okay, for number 3, we have a neutral atom has the same number of what? Okay, tandaan natin that it is neutral if mag-cancel out ang charges, the number of your protons and electrons. So it's neutral kapag equal ang mga number of protons and electrons. And for number 4, if an electron is added to a neutral atom, the atom becomes what? Tandaan ninyo that a negative is added to something that has no charge. So ang ibig sabihin, it becomes more negative. Ito yung portion that you have to remember for redox reactions. Okay. Kasi most of the time, we will be mentioning electrons na terms throughout our lesson for quarter 2. Okay, so meron tayo, tandaan natin yung number 4, which is if an electron is added to a neutral atom, the atom becomes more negative, or it has a negative charge. Okay? So yun ang sagot for number 4. Right. So let's just review these questions. Okay. So sino makasagot for number 1, which is I am in the center of your atom and I contain protons and neutrons. So let's just review. Anlin dito ang sagot. So the answer for this one is nucleus. Okay. Let's have number 2. I move around the nucleus in a shell or cloud. Okay, so sino yung na-mention ko kanina na nagmo-move around in shell or cloud? So we call it your electrons. Okay, so number 2 is electron. Number 3 is I am the lightest. Okay, sino ang heaviest nga? We have your protons and neutrons. The heaviest by several point zero zero something is your neutron. The lightest is your electron. Okay. Very good, Miss Ladao. Okay, so we have here number 4. So I am positively charged. So sino nga ang positive ang charge dito sa kanila? So we have your protons. Okay. So we have your protons. And we have here, I am heavy and have no charge. So tandaan ninyo, the heaviest one is actually your neutrons. And for number 6, in a neutral atom, there are as many of me as there are electrons. So the answer for this one is a proton. Okay, so number 6 is proton. All right, so let's have this one. Okay, this one is actually related with module 2, which is your enzymes, your biological enzymes, your bioenzymes. So this one is, let's underline the correct word. Okay, so if you heat up a reaction, you give the particles more energy or more surface area. So the correct answer for this one is, kapag nabasa nyo na ang module 2, so you will notice that actually temperature increases the energy of the particles moving around. So it's energy for number 1. Okay, number 2. This makes them move faster or slower. So there is more or less chance of successful collisions. So important ito na understanding because you have to remember that biological processes actually relies on different na chemical reactions. So you have to understand that for number 2, the answer would be this makes them move faster. So there is more chance of successful collisions. So yun ang sagot for number 2. Okay, for number 3, so increasing the temperature increases the concentration or rate of reaction. So alin dito ang mas ipipiliin nyo? So the entire section from numbers 1 and 2 actually relates to the rate of reaction. So increasing the temperature actually increases the rate of reaction. So you will notice this on the graphs. May napansin kayo dyan na graph regarding enzymes. So enzymes are actually compounds that rely on temperature. Kaya we have the optimal body temperature. We actually have a range of body temperature from 36.5 to 37 degrees Celsius. So that's about our body temperature. And it is optimal for the function of your biological enzymes. Kaya tayo nagme-maintain ng temperature. And you will notice that in your graphs doon sa inyong modules, you notice that the higher the temperature, the more likely the enzyme will inhibit its activity. Inhibit means titigil siya ng kanyang ginagawang biological activity. So most likely magsta-stop siya, going towards stopping. So, yun ang mangyayari kapag masyado ng mataas ang temperature. So, that's why kapag may fever tayo, we really need to have to control our temperature. Kaya we have the fever reducers na medicines, like we have your paracetamol and you have your ibuprofen, but the paracetamol is most likely used by doctors inside the hospitals. Okay, so meron tayo yung ibuprofen because it induces sweating. Okay, so let's have another question which is still related with your module 2. Okay, so in module 2 natin, we also have 2 or 3. Check natin. Okay. 3 pala. Okay, we have 2. Yes, 2. 2 ang enzymes. Okay, so we have here the related pa rin siya sa module 2. Okay, this time it's the surface area. Okay, bakit ma'am, bakit anong relationship po ng surface area sa ating enzymes? Class E, you have to remember that enzymes work on different locations, and the higher the surface area of that particular na concentrated compound or solution, the better the function of the faster is the rate of your reaction. So, ganun ang kanyang relationship. Kaya nga, the cells is actually, ganyan ang size nila. They are really small. So, they are just a few nanometers or micrometers ang kaliit nila or kalaki. It's because they rely on the surface area, which is on where your enzymes actually work. Okay? So we have here, there are 4 statements here about the surface area and the rates of reaction. Okay, so if you have already read your module 2, you will be able to answer this kaagad-agad. Okay, we have here number 1. Okay, breaking a larger solid into smaller pieces decreases the surface area. True or false? Okay. Tandaan natin that yung kapag maliit na siya, halimbawa, we have here your enzymes that work on your food particles. Okay, so you have there on your page. Let's check kung saan na page. Okay, you have there the food particles. Meron tayo yung page 4, which is ano yung enzymes na meron tayo regarding yung ginagamit natin na enzymes sa ating digestive system. And we have on page 3, which is the table, which is yung mga particular enzymes and substrates that your body actually works on. So meron tayo yung mga, the substrate is actually, ano yung compounds that they actually specifically work on. Kaya medyo related yung kanilang pangalan, napapansin nyo. Okay, so let's have this one. Breaking a larger solid into smaller pieces decreases the surface area. So the answer for this one is actually false. Breaking them into smaller pieces actually increases the surface area of your substance. And the higher the surface area, the more likely your enzymes will work better. Mas mabilis silang makapagtrabaho kapag smaller siya. Kaya nga we have several stages in our digestive system. Meron tayo yung enzyme na amylase, which is in our mouth. We have in our intestines for carbohydrate digestion, lang kasi yan si amylase. Then in our intestines, we have the maltase for your malt na mga type of sugars. We have also your sucrase for your sucrose. And that's for disaccharide na digestion. And we have other na mga pancreatic na mga enzymes which are used for the metabolism and degradation of your disaccharides into monosaccharides, particularly your glucose. Kaya nga yung starch natin is an example of a larger solid, which is here. So it's an example of a larger solid, and the disaccharides and monosaccharides are actually an example of the smaller pieces. Okay, the smaller the pieces are, the larger the surface area, and the better your enzymes will be working on your substances, and they will act better on that substrate. Okay, next we have number 2. Okay, we have number 2, which is a larger surface area will mean a faster rate of reaction. So balikan natin yung number 1 natin na question, which is ang sagot natin ay naging false. So for this one, it's actually true. Okay, so dahil sa tama na yung kanyang statement, which is a larger surface area, ang ano sinabi niya din is that it has a faster rate of reaction. Right. Number 3. Okay, we have number 3. So number 3 is actually talking about yung surface area pa rin, but it's related to collisions. Okay. Collisions is actually graphed in your modules, which is on page 4. Okay, so hindi makita ng everybody. Sorry, hindi maganda ang ating camera. Hindi tayo gumagamit ng MacBook. Okay, so we have here number 3. Okay, so a larger na surface area decreases the number of useful collisions. So you notice that we have here yung ano natin, we have meron tayo yung predicted na rates of reaction, which is on the top na portion ng inyong page 4 sa module 2. So you have there, meron tayo yung mas mabilis na rate of reaction. Rate of reaction actually, class, induces, the larger na surface area, the more enzymes that can work on, actually increases the number of successful and useful collisions. So mas mabilis siya. Kaya nga napapansin ninyo, kapag kumakain kayo, tapos nguya-nguya kayo, then after that time, napapansin nyo medyo umiinit yung katawan nyo. Okay. Actually, that's a product of the term na collision natin. Collision is actually sa nutrition and dietetics, we refer to it as metabolism. Okay. So ang ano natin dyan is that's actually, ang body heat is actually generated. It's because of the metabolism of the food that we eat. So kaya nga, may iba kasing tao like mga buntis, pregnant women are more prone to generation of body heat right after eating. Mapapansin ninyo, ginasingot na sila right after eating. It's because mas mabilis ang kanilang metabolic rate because of kailangan nila yung nutrients from their food. So you have here na that a larger surface area, that means yung broken down na pieces from the food that we eat actually increases the useful collisions. Okay, so the answer for that is you have false. So dapat the word na dapat i-change for this one is actually decreases. Alright? So you have there, next one. Hindi na natin yan isasali yung number 4 because that's already inorganic na material. Okay. Let's have this one, the last one na Q&A. So we have here, let's complete the paragraph by underlining the correct words. Okay, so you have a sentence, a paragraph here, then let's identify which is the correct word that we have to select. Okay, ito ginagamit ito ng mga students who are taking up physical sciences sa ABM, Humes, and TVL na mga cluster. Okay, ito siya ng mga quizzes. Right. Some catalysts, okay, tandaan natin that your enzymes, if you have already read your module 2, your enzymes are actually biological catalysts or biocatalysts. So when you say catalyst, they actually increase the rate of reaction. So for this one, let's select alin dito ang tama na terms that we have to in order to complete the entire paragraph and to make the entire paragraph make sense. Okay. So let's have first na sentence. Some catalysts give reacting particles a surface to stick to. And if you have already reviewed your module 2, you will see that you have here different na mga yung nasa enzyme activity, which is on page 3, you have there different na mga fits that we will be discussing later. So you have there, they have a surface to stick to, which is we call as substrate. Okay. They increase or decrease the number of successful collisions by lowering or raising the activation energy of a reaction. Catalysts are used in industry to save money because they often allow a lower or higher temperature to be used. Okay. So balikan natin, anong meaning ng ating enzymes? Ano ang meaning ng ating catalysts? So sila yung nagpapabilis ng ating reaction and they actually help to lower the activation energy. So kapag lower ang activation energy, alin ang better na alin na temperature ang mas gagamitin and mas mag-work on siya and mas mabilis niyang mapawork on ang entire chemical na process. So for this one, we have here they increase. So we have here they increase or decrease the number of successful collisions. So the answer for this one is actually increase the number of successful collisions. And the answer for this, another one, na second na set, is we have raising the activation energy of a reaction. So we have here hindi pala raising, it's actually lowering the activation energy. Okay, yun ang gamit ng ating enzymes. Okay, class, bakit ma'am nganong importante ang enzymes? Okay, enzymes kasi class actually lowers the activation energy. Ang ibig sabihin yan, hindi masyado mag-expend ng energy si body just to make the metabolic processes work. Okay, and faster. Mas mabilis din siya, mas mabilis matapos, mas hindi siya tatagal yung entire na process because of the help of enzymes. Kaya very important ang enzymes for the study of biology. Okay, so they actually lower the activation energy of the reaction. So they are used in the industry, especially for mga industrial purposes, gumagamit sila ng enzymes. They also use, mostly ngayon, gumagamit tayo ng biological enzymes. Kahit sa detergents natin, meron na tayong biological enzymes. And we have also biological enzymes that we use to create our food. Okay. So, yan ang ginagamit natin to save money because they often allow what? Because they lower the activation energy. Ang ibig sabihin, you will need a lower temperature. So, mas mababa din ang temperatura na kailangan mo in order to start the reaction. So, yun ang gamit ng inyong enzymes. Right? So, marami tayong types actually ng enzymes. We have your mga apo enzymes, holo enzymes. We won't be discussing that one. We'll just differentiate the meaning of enzymes, ganun na terms. Yun lang ang gagamitin natin because we are still in high school. College na yun siya ang mga terms na apo and holo enzymes. Right? So, balikan natin yung inyong discussion which is on module 1, which is your electronic configuration. So, doon sa inyong modules, which is on module 1, you have there the first topic na inyong na-discuss na meron doong part wherein you are going to write the electronic configuration for a particular atom or for a particular element. So, meron kayong isusulat na ganoon. And you will notice that it's actually, meron siyang periodic siya. Kaya meron tayong tinatawag na periodic table which is we associate with Mendeleev. So meron tayo this one. So this is actually, ang dati kasi na ginagamit natin is we have here yung old na system, which is meron pa tayo yung 1A, we have 2A, 3A, 3B, ganun siya. And it's actually very helpful kapag memorize mo na yan siya na placement na iyan. Mas madali yan siya kumpara sa yung sa IUPAC natin, yung bago natin na notation. The new notation is actually you just have the numbers 1 until 18. Okay, medyo hindi siya madaling i-memorize kung ano yung kanyang valences, ano yung kanyang pwedeng ipamigay, and at ano yung kanyang bonding behavior. Mas madali yung old na notation actually. Yun ang mas ginagamit namin sa college, ang old na notation. Alright? So, yun siya ang natin. So, may part din dyan sa inyong tables that you actually have to use the old na group na notation na number. Ganito. Okay? So, you have the alternative na group name, the number of electrons in the outer shell. So, that's part of your activity. You can fill that up na activity in your module. Pwede nyo naman kasing sulatan ang inyong module na iyan. Right? So meron din tayo yung discussion about your electron shell. For this now one, you will need your periodic table for this exercise. And for this one, sa inyong electron shell, we have here an example, yung pinasolve sa inyo, which is the example na binigay dyan is actually your magnesium. Okay, your magnesium 2+. Okay, so here we have your electron shell. Ano nga yung electron shell? So we have these are your energy levels where electrons are usually found. Sinabing usually because hindi naman talaga sila doon talaga mo makikita. Pero most of the time, they are there. So ganun siya ang iyong electron shell. Okay, so they actually move around between these shells. So kapag mas malaki siya na atom, mas marami din ang shells na nakapalibot sa kanya. So we have the first, second, and third na shells. If you remember still in your chemistry kay Sir Sarah, you have here the first shell only has 2 electrons. So it can only fill up the s orbital. So 2 electrons siya, s orbital lang. So you have the off-bow na filling na principle, yung off-bow natin na magkabaliktaran ng mga arrows. Okay, so yun siya ang nilalagay natin para mas ma-remember. That's elementary na style for your yun ang ginagamit, the off-bow na filling chart. So elementary yan siya. We call it elementary because it's the basic. Okay, so that's the basics for this one. Pero just to remember, the first shell is s orbital. For the second shell, you have the s and p orbitals. So you have 2, and p actually has 3, na meron tayong 3, and each of those actually contains 2 electrons, can contain 2 electrons. So meron tayo yung 6 na electrons for the p orbital. Okay? So that's a total of 8 electrons. And the third na shell natin is we have here the SPD. SPD is we have your 18 electrons. So meron tayo yung 2, 6, and 10. D orbital actually can contain 10 electrons. Okay, meron din tayo yung F, which is for the heavier elements, which is the only importance is that they are used for the study sa quantum physics, pero wala na sila masyadong sa biological na . So at third shell tayo lang magdi-discuss muna. Okay? So gagamitin lang yung pag quantum physics na. Alright? So these are the letter designations. If you still remember this one, we have the 0 na numbers and we have the letters. So we have the SPDFG. That's the highest one to date kasi we haven't yet found other elements beyond the ones that we have right now. Okay. So hanggang organeson, something pa tayo na mga elements. Alright? So we have also this one, if you still remember this, sa inyong mga notations, subshell notations. Hindi na natin yan i-discuss because this is already part of your chemistry. But just to remember, meron pa tayo yung mga examples of this one and the movements of your electrons. So this is already explained in chemistry. So this is your off-bound na filling chart. You just need to remember that they actually are not, hindi yung pasunod na SPDF na 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's actually magkakaiba sila. Remember that the electrons actually move around throughout this cloud here outside the nucleus. Kaya sila, they move around from one place to another. So this is the yung parang nila na sequences kung saan sila most likely mag-jump around. Okay? So yan ang energy level diagram. Alright. So we have here yung example natin for ang common kasi na ginagamit sa high school, which is in the Philippines, is we adopt the Lewis structures, which is dots. And for ibang bansa, like the ones that use GCSE or OCE na mga na mga evaluation systems, they use the dot and cross. Okay, so this is ang cross actually represents electrons. Okay, so for this one, ano yung mali daw sa diagram na ito? So just imagine that the cross actually are your the crosses actually are your electrons. So there is only, ang tandaan ninyo, always fill up the first shell with 2 electrons before you fill up the second na shell. Okay? So you have first shell has only 1 electron. So there are also 9 electrons in the second shell. The second shell can only contain 8 electrons. Tandaan natin that we have the S and P orbitals which are present on your second na dito sa labas. Second na shell. Okay? So yan ang rules ninyo sa pagsusulat. Kaya nga meron kayong example dyan sa inyong modules in module 1 which is your magnesium. So just follow that one. So pwede ninyong gamitin is actually dot and cross para mas madali ninyong maalala kung saan na ang inyong electron. Pwede din kayo, if you are very familiar and used to using Lewis structures, dots to represent your electrons, you can use that one. Alright? So we have here yung longhand and shorthand na method of writing the electronic na configuration. So we have here your electronic. Bakit electronic ito? Okay, electron configuration. Sorry ha. You have here the longhand and shorthand manner of writing. So we have the longhand, which is 1s2, 2s2, 2p2. So notice that the 6 here, which is your atomic number kanina, is distributed here. Okay. Mga nung kinahanglan maginamnitunan balikan. Okay. This is very important for bonding. Okay. Bakit niyo kailangan ito? Because it's very important for bonding. And bonding class is babalik-balikan niyo hanggang quarter 4. The bonding na portion na topic. Always yan siya ma-mention. And you have to understand the fundamentals before you go into the advanced na mga topics. Okay? Understanding is very important. Kapag sa biology, yung fundamentals ang key to understanding everything. Right? So you have here the shortcut, the one that we use for the periodic table, the one that you see in your periodic table. It's only represented until the third one, or we have your P na or the last one. So hanggang sa doon lang siya. So dahil sa medyo short si carbon, so pwede pa rin isulat yung longhand as shorthand. And we have the shorthand notation, which is the one that we use for IUPAC or other na mga ginagamit natin sa chemistry. Ito na yung shortcut na ginagamit, which is more common sa college. Ito yung pinapasulat. So you have here carbon. and it's represented by C, 2.4. The 2 is actually here, the first na shell, and 4 is actually the second shell. So this is added lang together ito siya ng mga exponents na ito. So this is 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. Okay, may exercises kayo niyan pagdating ng college. All right. So this is the mnemonics for electron distribution among orbitals. So this is the easiest na one that you can do para ma-remember ninyo paano ano yung pasunod-sunod sa off-bow filling up na chart. Okay, so because you have to follow the off-bow principle for filling up your electrons para masulat ninyo ang entire na electron configuration, the longhand method. The longhand method is always asked in exams kasi class. Okay, so we have 1s, then you have 2sp, then you have 3spd, then you have 4. Remember 4 is up to f na siya. Then 5 SPDF, then we have 6 SPDF, then 7 SPDF. Then remember meron pa tayo yung G but it's not used at all sa biology. All right? So this is an example of itong example ng isang periodic table, which is yung groupings ng inyong electrons. As alin ang merong S, which is your hydrogen and helium lamang ang maka-fill up niyan completely. And we have here your S and P na block. Okay. We call it block because they are found here. Yung maka-fill up completely ng S na part sa ito sila ng mga na shells. Okay. And we have the 3, 4, 5D na block. We have the D block, the P block, and we have here the F block, the lanthanide-actinide series. So, ito siyang F block, ang lanthanide-actinide. Alright? So, meron din kayong, ito, hindi ko na to sinali because this is medyo, na siya, higher, hindi na din siya kakasya sa inyong modules na examples on solving sa inyong Pero pwede niyo itong isosolve ulit. So, this is your example for your isa sa mga exercises na nasa inyong modules. So, if you tried to solve it, sa mga nag-try, kudos, mga good luck. Thank you very much for working on that. And sa mga hindi pa, try it because you'll never know how well you can do until you try. Okay, so we have here examples. Pwede nyo itong i-work on your own. So I'll give you the copy of this one so you can work on your own. Right, so you have here solve the electronic configurations of this one and also fill up this with electrons too. Okay, so we have ionic compounds. Let's go to ionic compounds. Ito yung pinaka-importante before we go to redox reactions, the ionic compounds, the ones that have charges. Okay, remember that the cation is the one with a positive charge. Tandaan yung T in cation. Cat means T. The T represents the positive charge. And we have the anion, the N1, what's that in sign language? Okay, ganito. Okay, we have the anion. So the N1 represents for the negative charge. All right? So this is their yung example ninyo dyan sa inyong module, which is meron tayo yung Louis naka dot and cross na model dyan na magnesium na 2+. So meron tayo yung ionization state niya is actually from the mas marami na siyang protons and lesser ang kanyang electrons. Kapag lesser ang kanyang electrons class, ang ibig sabihin, siya yung namimigay. Cations are the ones that actually give out their electrons. And usually, they have a very low electronegativity value. Okay. Mga naman dyan naman kay mga electronegativity value. It's because that's the reason why elements are able to bond to form compounds. And compounds are able to form bigger na compounds. Okay, so yun siyang ginagamit natin. Okay, so meron tayo yung kung kapag negative naman yan siya, ang sign niya, kapag negative naman yan siya, kapag negative siya class, ang ibig sabihin it's more, mas marami ang kanyang electrons. So kapag mas marami ang kanyang electrons, ang ibig sabihin is that it's the one that actually takes in or receives or gains the electrons that is given out by the cation. So, nagiging cation lamang siya kapag it loses an electron, kaya nagiging siyang more positive, and it becomes an anion when it gains an electron because it is more negative. Okay? So, yun ang nagiging ang meaning ng mga ions natin. So, they become ionic na compounds because they gain or lose electrons. Alright? So, meron tayo yung behavior for each family. Kaya nga sinabi ko sa inyo na mas importante yung, na very important, yung old notation. We have the 1A, 2A, 3A family. So, sila yung most likely that will form as cations. So, 1A, 2A, 3A families, so they become cations. We have the 5A, 6A, and 7A family. 7A family, they are the ones that will gain electrons and they become more negative. Tandaan ha? So we have here these groups and these are the elements na needed natin to study in biology. So ito sila are actually the ones that we actually use in biology. Ito sila ng mga families. Dito tayo kumukuha ng mga elements to form our compounds sa biology. Alright? So let's have an example for this one. Okay. Ma'am, paano siya ma-solve? Okay, so meron tayo yung sample natin na solving here. So we have here your lithium ion which has a mass number of 7 and an atomic number of 3. So meron tayo ding ang kanyang electron configuration na notation is 1s2, 2s1. Okay, so its nearest na noble gas is actually si helium, which is on the other part of your periodic table. So dahil sa si helium is actually 2, so ang ibig sabihin that's the most stable na state niya na it can hold on to. Ang kanyang mas nahahawakan niya yung dalawang electrons na iyan. So, ang ibig sabihin, it will readily lose its electron. One electron, itong nasa 2s1 na ito yung most likely ibibigay niya. Ito yung mangyayari sa inyong biological reactions, which is on photosynthesis and cellular na respiration during electron transport chain. Ito yung principle that they follow, especially the electron na mga carriers natin, which is your NADPH, NADH, you have your FADH2. Ito yung principle nila. Binibigay nila yung electron because they are more likely to lose it than to hold on to it. Okay? So, yun ang nangyayari sa kanila. So, we have here, because your helium here, which has atomic number of 2, so that means meron siyang dalawang electrons. So, ang ibig sabihin, the extra one that lithium has is more likely given doon sa ibang mga elements to form another compound. Okay. You will also notice that as it loses its electron, it becomes more positive. Remember, dahil sa mas marami na ang naiwan na protons than its electrons. So remember that the original na electron natin is we have here 3 electrons and it loses 1 electron. So it becomes 2 electrons. So on the original number, because the atomic number represents also the number of protons, so meron tayong the original number is actually 3 protons ni lithium, which is minus the 2 electrons. So magkakaroon siya ng plus na 1 na charge. So it is written as Li for the lithium na symbol, and we have the positive charge up nasa itaas, and it is written yung bago niya na electron configuration right after uh, right after losing its electron. So ang bago niyang electron configuration is 1s2. Okay? Sa mga mag-engineering, you will have this lesson sa inyong chemistry din. Alright? So, meron din kayong ganito sa inyong mga lessons. So, you have here this one. Remember class, kahit engineering kayo, meron kayong paring ionic bonding. Very important yan siya sa industry. Um, sa mga natin, mga buildings and mga structures natin or any mechanical na mga devices. So, needed yan siya. Alright? So, this is the common monoatomic cations. That means they exist by themselves. Nag-iisa lang yan sila, solo flight. Okay, so these are the common ones. And the ones that we actually use frequently inside our bodies are the sodium cation. We have here the potassium cation, which is na-remember ninyo sa inyong active transport, we have the sodium-potassium ninyo na carrier na protein na nasa inyong, sa loob ng inyong membrane proteins na ginagamit natin to move cations and anions around the membrane na surface ng inyong cell. Okay, that powers the entire cell. So meron tayong, babalikan pa rin natin yan siya sa ating quarter 2 na lessons. So we have sodium cation, the potassium cation, you have your magnesium and calcium na cation. We use them for, usually nasa brain kasi ito sila or the nerves, itong magnesium and calcium. And they are the ones that the neurotransmitters actually exchange around doon sa ating synapses. Okay, so we have also the barium. Barium has a biological importance because it is used for yung sa natin, radioactive na mga, sa radiology. So, barium is actually, pinapainom yan siya, tapos yan siya ang view. May certain na may certain na diagnostic test kasi that is used for it. Usually, it's related for digestive system. Kaya very familiar kami na ng mga nutritionist, dietitians regarding the barium na cations because it's used for radiologic processes for the digestion ng isang tao. So isa yan siya sa mga ginagamit. Okay, we have the silver cation, the zinc cation. Isa yan siya sa mga ginagamit natin. All right, so this is your fluorine. Fluorine class is very important in biology because we use it for our toothpaste, and the ones that actually hardens our teeth is actually the fluorine. So it's naturally occurring as gas, pero we use it as a compound na fluoride na ginagamit natin sa ating toothpaste. So it's already a compound na. Right, so we have here another example here. So it gains 1 electron, so most likely it will become negative. So kanina, diba, it loses electron, so it becomes positive. If it gains an electron, it becomes negative. Alright, so meron tayong yung sample ng mga monoatomic na anions, kanina cations. Okay, this is the ones that we actually use. Ang pinaka ginagamit sa katawan class is the oxides. Meron tayo yung super oxides, and they are the ones that are considered very harmful for living organisms. Kaya tayo kaya we always exhale air. It's because the oxygen, yung unstable niya na version kasi is actually very harmful in our body. Kaya tayo may mga metabolic na processes that we need enzymes to actually inhibit them or to actually change their properties para hindi siya maging harmful sa atin. Kaya meron tayo yung tinatawag natin antioxidants. Okay, so related yan siya. The oxidant na portion actually refers to the versions of the oxide anions. Meron tayo yung mga superoxides. And it differs from one organism to another. Magkakaiba-iba yan siya, yung mga oxides na iyan. Right? So that's one of the most harmful compounds that is a byproduct of biological na metabolism in organisms. Okay? So regarding the metals, ang pinaka-importante kasi na metals in the human body are actually the ones that we use for our processes natin. So most likely, meron tayo yung iron kasi si iron naman, meron siyang dalawang states. We have the ionic na states niya. We have the ferrous and ferric. We have 2 and 3. So the ferrous is 2 plus and we have the ferric na 3 plus. So meron tayo yung ferrous sulfate. Sa mga pharmacology, you have ferrous sulfate that's actually 2 plus. It refers to 2 plus. Okay. So meron din tayo yung mga importante in biological processes. It's because they are very harmful. Take for example, you have your mercury. Mercury is banned in yung old natin na mga thermometers. It's because it accumulates, it biomagnifies in our bodies. It accumulates in our body. Kasi, so it also becomes poison. Okay, so it's poisonous sa ating katawan. Lead is also that way. For most organisms, it's deadly, the same as your mercury. Si lead is also deadly. And it's present mostly in yung mga super colored na mga substances, like kaya nga tayo yung mga may presence kasi ng lead in some lipsticks. Be careful girls kasi yan siya, that's why it's very important for pharmacists and mga organic na chemists to actually produce yung mga substances na walang masyadong lead or walang lead na mga substances. Kasi may mga toys din that are actually higher in lead and most of the kids actually ingest them. So we call that disorder as pica. So nai-ingest nila and they actually consume lead through that. So it's actually can cause mental retardation ang lead. So may biological importance si lead sa atin. Okay, so we have here, sinong makakonstruct ng diagram for sodium and chlorine? So, paano siya gain and lose ng electron? So, actually, madali lang ito siya kasi remember that sodium and chlorine actually has both the same na charges. So, cation ng isa, ang isa is an anion. Cation si sodium, si chlorine is actually an anion. Okay, so ibibigay mo lang ang isa kay chlorine, isang electron, tatanggapin ni chlorine ang isang electron to become more negative and si sodium becomes more positive because it loses one electron. So yun ang sagot dyan. Alright, so ito yung nangyayari sa kanilang dalawa, this one. So you have here an example. So you can have these questions as your guide to answer, to actually understand this na bonding nilang dalawa. So, yan ang nangyayari through bonding sa ionic natin na bonding. Alright? Ionic or covalent na bonds. Yung polar covalent. So, most ions like your this one, your calcium, your sodium, and potassium are very important for bodily processes. So ito yung mga examples natin, yung na-mention ko kanina. Si hydrogen class is very important for acid-base balance. Ginagamit natin yan siya because of sa ano kasi yan siya class, especially for extracellular and intracellular spaces, the balances of pH sa dalawang iyan para your enzymes will work best. Remember that nasa inyong module 2 na mention dyan that pH is actually very important for the maintenance of your enzymes na activity, enzymatic activities. So, isa yan siya. Another thing is that we have your chlorine, this one, mga bicarbonates, you have your ammonium, iron, magnesium, you have your phosphate, iodide, and the molybdenum. So, isa yan sila. So, sa mga plants class, we have the molybdenum. So, hindi lang tayo yung, but this is biology but not focused really on human. So, meron tayo yung plants, other animals. So, isa yan sila. And we have here the important electrolytes in the body. So, you don't need to memorize this one until quarter 4. Quarter 4, you have to be very familiar with them. Kasi sila yung ginagamit, i-mention natin frequently na. Alright, let's go to ionic and covalent bonds before we end our lesson today. Okay. So, for ionic and covalent bonds, meron tayo yung terms like electronegativity. Kanina, na-mention ko that the more electronegative the atom is, the lesser the electronegativity of an atom, the more likely it will lose its electron. So, sino ang mag-gain ng electron? The one that has a higher electronegativity. Okay, ma'am, unsa ng electronegativity? So, electronegativity refers actually to how this atom or this atom actually can draw the electron towards itself. So, parang the higher your electronegativity is, the more attractive you are. So, para siyang attraction level ng isang atom. Yun ang electronegativity. Okay, so ang ano kasi for this one is that the electron density niya kasi class is most of the time the ones that has a higher electronegativity is the one that will only need 1 or 2 or 3. Ang pinakamalakas manghatak class is the one that will be needing only 1 electron to complete the last na shell or the valence shell. Okay? So kapag iisa na lang yung kulang niya, most likely siya yung tigpangayo. Okay? Pag gamay na lang ang kulang niya mo itong tigpangayo. So it's more likely because it's the electronegativity values because it's an absolute number, so it has no units. Kapag magsabi ka that it has the, for example, you have your fluorine. Fluorine has a 4.0 na electronegativity. You don't need another unit to mention the term 4.0. Okay? So, yun ang electronegativity value for fluorine. It's because si fluorine kasi class, dahil sa highest yung 4 na electronegativity value, si fluorine in the biological na world, siya yung pinaka-important na compound. Siya yung pinaka-malakas manghatak na compound. Siya din ang siya yung pinaka-reactive din sa kanilang lahat. Okay? So after it is already filled up, yung kanyang valence na shell, kompleto na siya, and it's usually 8 ang kanyang ikukompleto. So kapag kumpleto na yan siya, it's more likely to become stable. Okay, so yan siya ang kanya depende din sa lakas ng hatak. Okay, the lesser ang electronegativity, the more likely it will lose its electrons. So we have here the electronegativity value of some selected na elements which are common in biological na processes. So we have oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, carbon, phosphorus, hydrogen. So the oxygen class, kaya siya highly reactive, kaya tayo may redox reaction, reduction, oxidation reactions. It's because it has a higher electronegativity value. Mataas ang kanyang electronegativity value. So palahingi yan siya ng electrons. It's also the same with your carbon. Si carbon class, because its electronegativity value is 2.5, it's also more likely to ask for electrons. But, si hydrogen naman class, nasa middle kasi siya, nasa 2.1. Remember, 4 ang highest natin. So, dahil sa middle siya, si hydrogen, kaya si hydrogen can take can be positive or can be negative. Pwede siya maging ganyan. So, yan ang nangyayari kay hydrogen. Kaya pwede siyang mamigay, pwede din hindi. Pwede siya yung hihingi, pwede din siya yung mamimigay. But most of the time in biology, siya yung namimigay. Okay, it loses its electron. So, siya yung nawawalan ng parte ng kanyang sarili. Okay, so this is your map for your chemical bonds, which is hindi ko siya naisali sa inyong module because wala na tayong portion na pwede natin i-insert niyan. Okay, limited kasi yung pages na pwede lang namin gawain para sa inyong modules. Alright? So these are your common na chemical bonds which we use for our biological compounds. We have the covalent, ionic, and the metallic. So we have here covalent, it's between nonmetals and nonmetals. So it can be divided between polar and nonpolar. Polar siya class if there is an equal sharing of electrons. So polar kapag the other is highly electronegative, tapos ang isa na pares, ang kapares niya is the one that's very low yung kanyang electronegativity. Just imagine sa polar class ha, it's the polar opposites, like pinakagwapa o pinaka dili gwapa. Okay, ganun siya. Kung ang extreme is maot o gwapa, ano siya. So that's the polar na term na covalent. Kapag non-polar naman class, it's like equal kayong dalawa ng level. So like maot ang isa, ang gwapang isa, gwapang isa, gwapo ang isa, gwapo ang isa. That's non-polar. Yun siya ang non-polar covalent na bonding. Okay, so the most common sa biology is actually polar covalent bonds. Sila yung pinaka because they are medyo unstable kasi yan siya. And kaya siya very important in nature because it's very useful for kasi transient kasi ang ibang bonds between biological compounds, and it's very helpful for enzymes to work on. Kaya siya useful si polar covalent bond. Okay, si non-polar naman, useful pa rin siya, but dahil sa fairly stable na ang kanyang bonding, so hindi siya masyadong nagiging reactive. Kaya siya mas maraming enzymes ang ginagamit to used on them para ma-activate na naman sila, para maghatian naman sila, mag-separate from each other. Parang ayaw na namin mag-separate from one another because we are just equal. We click on the same level. Ganun ang story ng mga non-polar. Okay? We have also ionic. Okay, si ionic naman class is the one that are oppositely charged ions naman yan sila. So we have here the metals and non-metals. So they form, meron kang positive, meron kang negative. So you form an ionic compound. So the electronegativity na difference between the substances or the atoms or the compounds is actually, ang value niya is more than 2.0. So yan siya ang magiging electronegativity value niya. And we have here the metallic. Metallic is hindi masyado siya nakikita in biological nature, but sometimes they are present. Okay. So this is the value interpretation, which is available in your modules. In module 1, so you have 0 is equal to pure covalent. You have 0.1 to 0.4 is the nonpolar covalent. And we have 0.5 to 1.9 is equal to polar covalent. And we have 2.0 and above, it's ionic na bonding na. Okay? So tandaan that from 0 to 1.9 or below 2.0, that's a covalent bond between the atoms or elements. Okay? So yan siyang pinapasolve sa inyong module 1. Okay. So we have here the trends on electronegativity, which we find in our periodic table. So electronegativity actually increases from the bottom up. Okay, so from francium to your hydrogen, you have increasing electronegativity there. and you have increasing electronegativity from your hydrogen towards your helium. Here, ito sila, which we call as the noble gases. They actually have filled up the last na the valence shell. They are filled up completely with 8 electrons. Kaya we have here 8A. Okay? So that's already complete ang kanilang valence na shell. So ang ibig sabihin, they are fairly stable. And napansin din ninyo that regarding the trend, so increasing siya dito, here, and we have here astatine ito. So we have here fluorine. So dito siya. And we have increasing here. Kaya si fluorine talaga class ang pasok sa banga. Okay, pasok na pasok siya. It's because your fluorine is actually the one that has a higher electronegativity. Okay, pumapasok din dito si chlorine. We have your bromine. Okay, so yan sila ang mga ating mga substances that are actually highly electronegative. So nandito din banda, dahil sa nasa itaas din sila, you have your boron, carbon, and your nitrogen and oxygen. So your CNOF, those are actually highly electronegative na mga elements. Okay, so this is ionic bonding. Ionic bonding is very important in biology because they are the ones that are broken down by your enzymes in the body para may use natin yung mga kinukonsume natin na metals and non-metals. Like, you have your sodium, you have also your chlorine. Para magamit natin sila the elements on their own, which is to isolate them, we break these ionic bonds using enzymes. Okay? So, kaya siya importante para na mag-study nito. So, this is the representation of them using their, yung kanilang mga, yung kanilang Lewis structures. Alright? Okay. Okay, we have here another one which is an example of your covalent na bond. Okay, ano yung difference nilang tatlo? Okay, so meron tayo yung non-polar, we have the polar, and we have the ionic. Diba sinabi ko kanina, si non-polar covalent, ka-level lang kanilang kagandahan sa isa't isa. So, ang ibig sabihin, hindi sila mag-aawayan kung kanino pupunta yung isang electron nila, yung the part of themselves. So, ang ibig sabihin, that's equal sharing. Kapag may equal sharing ka, you have non-polar covalent bond. So, remember that the value for electronegativity difference between the two would need to be below 0.5. So, if it's 0.5 to 1.9, that would be your polar covalent bond. So, ito yung polar covalent natin na bond. The polar covalent bond kasi class, because the other one is highly electronegative. Remember kanina, di ba, na-mention ko si chlorine is one of the highly electronegative na atoms because it's just below your fluorine. So, siya yung mas mahatak na nag-a-attract ng inyong electrons. So, dahil siya yung mas mag-a-attract ng electrons, kaya siya, fluorine is actually always found in nature as a compound. So, commonly, hindi lang yan siya by itself. Most of the time, it's as a compound with other substances like this one. So, this is your hydrochloric acid. Para magawa ang hydrochloric acid, so HCl, you have your hydrogen, which is low ang electronegativity value, and you have your chlorine, which is a higher ang electronegative value. In polar covalent bonding class, you see these signs. Ito siya. It refers to partial positive na charge. And this negative one is meron tayong partial negative na charge. So, partial positive si hydrogen, partial negative si chlorine. It's because nagpo-pull-pull yan siya. Parang push and pull yan siya, tug of war. So, parang akin mo na siya, hindi akin mo na to siya. So, parang nag-aawayan niya sila. Kaya siya nagiging polar covalent. And it's always represented in chemistry as parang ganito na cloud. mas napapansin niyo yung non-polar, magkapareho yung kanilang parang clouds of electrons, but for polar covalent, you notice that this one is actually mas malaki ang kanyang cloud, this one. All right? And compared to the hydrogen, si chlorine. So that's the difference between them. And we have here the ionic bonds, okay? For the ionic bond, which is what we break to make use of the sodium and chlorine by themselves para ma-separate natin sila at magamit natin ng isa dahil mas kailangan natin ng isa, which is si sodium kasi ang mas parati natin ginagamit, si chlorine naman ginagamit natin para makipag-bond kay hydrogen para magawa natin yung hydrochloric acid natin sa ating katawan to digest our proteins, protein-rich na mga foods. So, yan siyang gamit ng ating ionic bonds. Okay, so sa ionic bonds is just giving and losing electrons. Yun ang ionic bonding, complete transfer. Like, friend, ayoko na nito. Parang sa tingin ko, ito na lang ang kukumpleto sa iyo. So, ito, sa iyo na ito. Ganun ang drama ng ionic bonding. Okay? So, that's how it is done. So, this is hydrogen fluoride. Okay? So, this one is electron poor na region. Kasi most likely, it will lose the electron most of the time. And this is the electron rich na region, the red one. It's because the electron will stay here most of the time while they are bonded. Okay, so this is the examples ng mga bonding. Ginagawa ito sa chemistry, right? Na lesson ninyo kay Sir Sarah. Alright? So, meron tayo yung other na mga examples like molecular bonding between molecules. Meron tayo yung mga weak na electrical attraction that binds these molecules. We really need them in biology, like the van der Waals. Van der Waal is actually very important, or van der Waals, yan siya, ang spelling. So, or kaya pag sabi ng iba, it's van der Waals. So, pwede nating tawagin, simplify natin van der Waals. So, yun siyang ang examples of molecular bondings. It's between compounds na. Okay? So, ginagamit natin yan to make a stable na solution or stable na compound. So, for example, this one is actually water. So, the electrical attraction between hydrogen and oxygen of the water molecules is actually very important in biology. Alright? So, those are the electrons. Pwede niyo itong gawan ng dot and cross na diagram, or you have kung familiar kayo sa Lewis structures, you can do that one. Okay? So, you have also your problem solving, electron configurations of the elements before the reaction and after the reaction. Okay? So, these are their properties sa mga higher na chem. Right. So, let's have this one. Okay, dito tayo punta sa ating electronegativity and bonding one. Okay. Wait lang. Let's close this and open this. Okay. All right. So, let's have this one, which is your electronegativity in bonding. Meron tayo yung hydrogen bonding in water. But, hydrogen bonding kasi class in chemistry and in biochemistry is very important, hindi lang sa water. Marami tayong hydrogen bonding examples in nature. And it's most apparent sa inyong DNA. Okay, DNA, RNA, that's actually bonded through hydrogen bonding and van der Waals. Yun siya ang ginagamit natin na mga bonds. So, kapag between molecules na, it's van der Waals. If it's between the elements to form the compounds, it's the hydrogen bonds. And it's usually by covalent, it's both nonpolar or polar covalent bonding ang ginagamit din. Okay? So, most of the times, ito yung kanyang, yung kanyang charges. We have slightly positive, slightly negative na charges. So, si Oxygen, dahil sa, remember that it has a higher electronegativity, so siya yung most likely kukuha ng mga ating tinatawag na electrons. Okay? So, most of the time class, meron din tayo yung tinatawag natin na bonds between your substances. Like, meron tayo yung polar na molecule like this one, yung sa water na hindi equal yung pagkakabigay-bigay. And it's the one that actually indicates that water can actually form compounds with other na substances because this is slightly lang ang charge. Ang ibig sabihin, pwede mo pa siyang maipamigay ulit. Pwede siyang matanggal ulit sa iyo. So, ang ibig sabihin, this one is medyo weak yan siya na bonding. So, kaya nga, very useful si water as a solvent. It's because the bonds between them are actually weak. And madali si water mag-disassociate, we call it disassociation, to form solutions. Okay? Kaya meron tayo yung mga terms like solutions. It's because water is actually bonded weakly using polar covalent bonding. Right? So, meron tayo yung yung usefulness ng ating hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonds, because it's very hindi namamatay kaagad ang tao kapag masyado kang mainit ang katawan mo. It's because you require a higher energy, a higher boiling point to break all those bonds. Kaya nga dapat matakot talaga kayo kung aabot na siya ng 40 because that's the peak one. And that's the time that the enzymes in your body loses the bonds between them. Hindi na siya mag-work and it's not the optimal na environment na for your enzymes to work on. So, and it's also very important for water to actually have a higher na energy magre-require siya ng higher na boiling point kasi that's why water can exist as a liquid form. Especially in our body kung 40 degrees nagkalintura ka and you have 40 degrees na temperature. So kapag ganun na kataas in Celsius ang iyong temperature, ang ibig sabihin what if kung ang boiling point is 40, wala na, nagbukal na ka at 40. And it's a good thing that it's 100 degrees Celsius ang ating boiling na temperature because hindi tayo madaling madidegrade. So, kaya din liquid ang form ng water in the environment sa mga ecosystems natin. It's because water has a high boiling point. Hindi siya kaagad nag-evaporate. So, matagal siya mag-evaporate. So, medyo matagal din medyo hindi din ganun kabilis ang rate of evaporation compared to the rate of condensation and precipitation. So, babalik-balik pa rin siya. Kaya tayo mayroong water cycle. Okay? So, this is the bonding of your substances between water. So, meron tayo yung hydrogen bond here. We have also hydrogen bonds here. We have hydrogen bonding here. Okay, so marami siyang hydrogen bonds. And we have also van der Waals na bonding. So, it's between molecules. Alright? So, this one is already discussed in class, higher na biology and chemistry. But you just need to understand that van der Waals is also present dito na part din sa ating bonding. Okay? So, brief lang yan siya. Ginagamit siya between your molecules. Okay? So, meron tayong ganito. And we have here, ganito. Si hydrogen class is most abundant between molecules like hydrogen and itself, hydrogen or oxygen, hydrogen or nitrogen, and hydrogen or fluorine. The most highly electronegative atoms, NOF. Yun ang pinaka nagbabond with hydrogen. And yan ang pinaka-present. Kaya nga yung inyong DNA class, meron yan siyang nitrogen actually. The nucleic acids have nitrogen in their chemical structure. So kaya siya present din si hydrogen as a form of bonding between those molecules. Kaya tayo, very important si hydrogen bonding in biology kasi it's present even in your DNA. Alright? So, meron tayong examples dyan in your, okay. This is your example of hydration cells when the water actually dissociates para to form other compounds with other substances para to form a solution. So, this is what we call as hydration shells. So, ito yung tinatawag natin na ionic na compounds. So, present siya among ionic compounds ang hydration shells. So, ginagamit ito ng mga gumagawa, ng mga chemists, ng mga mag-chemistry dyan. This is a very important na part ng inyong lesson. So, this is yung negativity, yung electronegativity ng chlorine is very highly attractive. And the negative na value attracts the positive na side, which is your hydrogen. So, siya yung mag-a-attract kay hydrogen from water. And si positive na charge ng inyong sodium actually attracts the negative na charge ng inyong oxygen. Kaya mag-dissociate siya. Si water, kapag lagyan mo ng asin, kaya nagiging siyang salt solution or brine solution sa chemistry. So yun siya ang ginagamit natin na that's why we call water as a universal solvent. It's because it's capable of making hydration cells. The word hydrate, ang ibig sabihin, it can donate its hydrogen and it can lose its hydrogen. Hydrate means it will add it will dissociate and add itself to the compounds or elements para to form another compound. Okay? So, yan siya ang ating hydration shells. This one is hindi na siya natin dinagdag sa ating sa atin palang module dahil hindi siya kakasya. Okay, sorry class ha. Medyo marami ang hindi nakasya. Alright? So this is an example of a hydroxyl group of an alcohol. Maraming alcohol pala na substances in our body. Hindi lang yung literal na alcohol like the alcohol from your wine or other na mga distilled na spirits, but also alcohol from different compounds. So meron tayo yung the hydrogen bonding between them is actually between polar na groups like the hydrogen and the oxygen na portion. Ito siya yung hydrogen bonding nila. So hydrogen becomes the donor of electrons. Si oxygen naman dito is naging acceptor naman siya. Okay? Then we have also between carbonyl. Kapag sinabi mong carbonyl, we have the C double bond O. If you have reviewed your module 1, you have there your functional groups na inyong dapat i-memorize. Plus, be very familiar with that because you have to memorize all of them. Kasi yan siyang parati nating i-mention throughout this quarter. Kaya sinali ko talaga yan siya sa inyong module, ang functional groups. Okay? Dapat memorize na yan siya by this time. Kasi hindi pa kayo nakadiscuss ng organic chemistry. So, dapat memorize, mag-start na kayo ng memorize ng functional groups. So, C double bond O is actually a carbonyl group. Ketones are actually byproducts of carbohydrate metabolism. So, kapag na-digest na completely si carbohydrate, ang byproduct niya na we take as waste, we call it as waste, is the ketones. Okay, sa mga nag-high carbohydrate or naglo-low carbohydrate na diet, most likely you will suffer from ketosis. Okay. Ketosis is may acetone breath. Yung amoy ng bibig mo is para ng acetone. So that's yung parang deterrent for mga nagda-diet, extreme na mga diets. Okay. So, ang nangyayari dyan is actually, paano siya natatanggal sa ating katawan. Remember that water is considered as a universal solvent. So this is what happens in your body. Kaya siya nadidissolve and natatanggal and it's present in your urine. Kaya tayo meron tinatawag sa urinalysis as ketone bodies or the presence of ketones. So ang ibig sabihin yan, it's either you are malnourished, it's either the other na ano sa malnourished is undernourished ka during that time, nagsasuffer ka from weight loss. So present ang ketones dyan. Sa mga magme-medicine, you should be very familiar with this portion. Okay, so ito yung nangyayari. Oxygen is the one that will bond with the hydrogen of your water para madali siyang maalis sa iyong katawan. Will be urinated as waste. Okay, we have also the amino group of your amine sa water. Okay, sa hydrogen bonding nila, bakit ma'am anong gi-appeal pa man nimo ang amino group? The amino group class is very important because it's present in your this is in your proteins. Nasa proteins ito sila. So the amine groups is actually the core na part of your protein. Nandun si protein sa ating sa ating amine. So siya ang core na portion. So we have here this one, the NH2. The hydrogen is the one that will bond with the oxygen. Tandaan ha, NOF. Okay, so it's the hydrogen because hydrogen here is not in the center, nasa labas lang siya ni amine. So ang ibig sabihin, siya yung most likely to bond with the oxygen portion of your water. Okay? So very useful siya because we use it as yung pagpapalabas ng ating urea. Sa humans kasi class, meron tayo yung urea. Familiar ba mo uric acid? Okay. Sa, di ba maano ninyo, urea actually class is actually the byproduct of protein metabolism. Kung si ketone is sa carbohydrate, si urea is a byproduct. Kapag natapos na lang digestive protein, like the meats, the eggs, yung vegetables natin which contain your proteins. So, ang ibig sabihin, meron kang amino na meron kang urea as your byproduct. So, siya is very harmful and highly concentrated yan siya. And it is dissolved in water using hydrogen bonding. Okay? Between the molecules. So it is also taken as waste outside of the body, taken as waste by your, filtered as waste by your kidneys. Okay? Kidney na portion natin na discussion will be taken in your quarter 4. Alright? So this is what I said kanina. So we have here interstrand, intrastrand na hydrogen bonding. In your meron tayo yung mga beta and alpha pleats natin sa ating RNA or sa mga proteins natin. So this is pleating actually, we call it pleating. So meron kayong example niyan sa inyong module 2. Okay. Sa module 2 ninyo, you have here examples of how your proteins are actually folded. Sa mga magme-medicine, yung separate ninyo na lecture, I'll be taking that up, yung discussions regarding the pleating, alpha and beta pleats. So, sa mga proteins natin. That's a separate na lecture kasi delete yan siya for the MELCs. Deleted yan siya na competencies. But you really need it because you will jump right into biochemistry by the time you enter college. Wala ng chemistry na part class, diretso mo sa biochem. So, you really need to be familiar to have higher grades in that subject. Pero hindi din kayo magka-dakulelat din pagdating sa college. Kawawa din kayo noon. Okay? So that's separate na lecture. This one, inintroduce lang sa inyo dito ang mga structures like the primary, the secondary, the tertiary, and the quaternary structures. So these are actually biological na structures na ang kanilang ganyan sila pagkakapakita sa sa ang kanilang mga compounds. Alright? So this is example of a macro image of your oil and water. Remember that oil is lipid. Lipids class are non-polar and your water is a polar substance. So they are opposites of each other. That's why they do not mix with each other. Ma-mix mo lang sila on a special na way and we call that product as an emulsion. Sa mga magme-medicine and magpa-pharmacology, you really need the term to understand the term emulsion. So you really need to understand paano na-mix for mas-stabilize yan siya na solution yung oil and water. So, yan siya. Mga colloidal na mga substances, nandyan din yan siya. Papasok din ang bonding in that. So, good luck sa mag-study niyan. Right? So, let's have properties of water. This is the last one na. So, we have here, water can take in many forms. You have the icebergs, the icicles of your snowflakes, and yung mga recent natin na droughts na season like the El Nino and the extreme drought that United States actually is suffering. So yan siya ang ano natin sa sa biology, pinaka-importante because ecosystems class, hindi lang kasi tayo mag-focus on nasa loob lang ng katawan ng isang organism or ano lang nasa immediate na surrounding, but it actually the entire na community, the entire ecosystem, the entire biome that the organism actually lives on. So hindi lang siya yung niche niya ang kanyang ating iisipin for biology. We have to take in the entire ecosystem or biomes. So water is actually important to maintain the integrity of those biomes and to maintain the diversity of organisms. Without water class, life would actually cease to exist. So kaya nga tayo nagpapadala ng mga missions towards Mars. Bakit kailangan talaga maggasto-gasto ng ilang bilyones ng na dolyar? Pwede naman pakainin na lang ang mga third world countries with that money. But they have to test whether there is a sign of life outside of Earth. Okay, para sa mga scientists kasi that's a big deal for them. But for us, parang hindi naman tayo nakikita natin yung bigger picture. But for them, they see something like that as conquering something na outside of themselves. Okay? So, yan siya ang nangyayari sa kanila. Hindi na lang natin i-explain yan. Okay? This one is actually a quiz. That's part of pwede ninyong studyhan. Okay, let's have the properties of water one by one. Okay, this is the last one. We'll have a separate na lecture regarding the other na topics for modules 2 and 3 kasi kulang na tayo ng oras and kawawa na kayo dyan kasi parang nasusunog na yung mga puwet niyo. Alright, number 1, we have the polarity and solvency. Okay, for polarity and solvency, water has a high polarity. It's because it can attract and can be attracted to ions and polar compounds para maging soluble sila and para makagawa ng isang solution. Okay, bakit siya beneficial for biology? It's because this helps your substances to actually move freely in your cell. Diba na-mention natin sa ating transport mechanisms like your diffusion, osmosis, you have your active transport, your endocytosis, exocytosis. Now, they can move around substances. So actually, it is allowed and it is done. It's because water has high polarity. It can attract the ions, it can make the ions, it can donate those ions to other na mga compounds or substances. Okay? Another thing is that we have here, that's also the reason why water can dissolve, why salt can dissolve in water. And we have the dipole-dipole na ion dipole moments na interactions. This is higher na chem na. So, i-mention ko lang na merong ganyang interactions pa to make it possible for water to actually dissolve substances in itself. Okay? So, meron tayo ding, for example, like this one, yung mga amphiphilic na mga molecules, the one that actually are not supposed to mix with water, and we call them as nonpolar compounds. So this is an example of a nonpolar compound, the sodium palmitate. Okay, so sodium palmitate ninyo, so meron siyang polar na head. The polar head, which is a COO, okay, so ang COO niya is actually the one that will be, ito yung kanyang, parang the one that will attract the ions towards itself. And it has a nonpolar tail here. We have a triglyceride. Usually, mga triglycerides kasi or the lipids, they are the ones that has nonpolar tails. We call it tails. It's because of the structure niya. It has a polar head na identified as a circle and the tail na parang pa-zigzag. It's because of the dimensionality of your carbon na structure. Sa mga magme-med, may special kayo na lecture regarding that one. Sa organic chem kasi yan siya na part na. Okay, so we have here examples of hydrophobic and hydrophilic structures. Usually, they are the ones that form as tail and heads in our biological substances. So usually, the ones that will form as heads are the amino acids, phosphate esters, you have your ionic compounds, you have your sugars. So merong other na polar compounds like your alcohols and ketones. Okay, so those are the ones that will form the head. And the one that are hydrophobic in nature, na hindi gusto ng tubig, okay, the one that will form it are the ones that are non-polar compounds. So we have the hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are, examples of them are the hexane, the propane, ganon. So those are examples of hydrocarbons. You have your fatty acids. Those are examples of lipids. And you have your cholesterol. Okay, cholesterol is an example of a hydrophobic substance. Sila yung hindi masyadong nagmi-mix with water. So they form tails and they bond with these substances, yung hydrophilic substances, to form solutions with water. Para din medyo magana sila. So sa mga magki-chemist, be very familiar with this one kasi they are the ones that will power your reactions. Okay, so water is also considered as a biological solvent. So it can dissolve many substances. So for the breakdown of your food, absorption of your food through the lacteals or your bloodstream, excretion and secretion of your substances throughout your body. So si water ang parating ginagamit dyan. Okay? So usually, di ba, we maintain a higher body temperature. It's because substances are actually dissolved faster and as you learn from your module 2, mas mabilis din sila mas mabilis din si enzyme makatrabaho during that time. So it's the peak or the optimal na temperature that's required for enzymes to actually work. Alright? So meron din tayong water can be used as a lubricant. So water is actually used as lubricant to prevent extreme na friction between your joints. There's a disease condition for that. Marami tayong ganyan na mga sakit which is yung abrasive na yung pagganyan-ganyan ng inyong mga ligaments and cartilages dyan sa inyong bones. So that's actually protected by a thin film of water-based na lubricant. So we have also for your heart. Si water kasi is the one that actually moistens the entire ng chambers of your heart. That's and actually siya yung nag-fill up sa volume ng blood. Okay, si water. Kaya nga, kapag may class, may sakit ka sa puso, most of the time, and always talaga, ang doctor mo, your cardiologist, would actually tell you that you have to maintain just a little bit of water to drink. And hindi siya talagang drink. Actually, ang sasabihin sa inyo is, you have to sip the water. Sip lang. Kasi it's because water actually, kapag mas maraming tubig ang naiinom mo, mas mataas ang blood volume mo. Mas maraming tubig ang dugo mo, mas mas taxing para kay heart ang mag-pump those blood, yung mas maraming blood. Kaya siya hindi maganda yung maraming tubig para sa mga may problem sa heart. And those that actually have a higher blood pressure. That's not actually really good. Okay? Kaya hindi maganda na may sodium ka, masyadong parat yung kinakain mo because sodium actually attracts more water and it allows the body to retain more water. Okay? Sa mga magme-medicine, good luck. That's part of your lesson. Okay, so last one is we have here the intestines during digestion. Lubricant siya because mucus is actually water-based. Yan siya na substance. So it's the lining, the one that lines and protects the the gut from the abrasive nature of the enzymes or the acids and bases that your body actually secretes in order to digest your food. Okay. Sa quarter 4 yan natin na lesson, digestion. Yeah, we have a separate lecture for that. All right. So you have hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonding is the one na reason kung bakit ice has a lower density and it floats above your water. So kaya siya very useful for example, for life forms na meron tayo yung ice is actually less dense than water, kaya para maka-float siya. Kaya nga useful siya in ecosystems that actually have meron silang 4 seasons, like they have winter. Kasi hindi nagpa-freeze ang entire na like bodies of water that have fishes or plant or algae, or you have your planktons doon sa like lakes. So hindi siya doon entire na lake ang mag-freeze, doon lang sa ibabaw. So the organisms living beneath it or sa mga ocean floors like the benthic area, yung pinakamababa na, yung pinaka hindi na tatagusan ng light. So ang ibig sabihin, they can still survive and they can still survive until the next season, which is the spring, when ice is actually nagme-melt na because of the higher temperatures na. Okay? So yun ang pinaka-benefit niya ng lower density of your ice. Okay, we have also cohesion and adhesion. Okay, bakit sabay yan sila? Cohesion is actually yung pagdidikit-dikit ng molecules. Napapansin niyo that water can actually be a very good solvent. It's because it can make the molecules stick together in itself. 'Di ba in solutions, water can actually contain as long as nasa nasa isang container pa yan siya. So kaya niyang i-contain, isahin ang lahat ng mga substances within it. And it can adhere to surfaces, like it's very useful for transpiration in plants. Ang adhesion niya na property, makadikit din siya sa walls of your xylem. Okay, so nagiging useful din si plant during that time. Okay, si hydrogen bonding pala in water during that period. Okay, so those are the cohesion adhesion. So meron tayo yung germination of plants. Actually, kapag, di ba napapansin ninyo, mang diligan, ginamuan panom, or medyo moist yung soil that your seeds are actually, or your plant actually, bakit nilalagyan natin ng water? It's because they can germinate. It's the trigger na mechanism, that's the trigger na yun ang signal nila to germinate actually, and that's i-discuss natin thoroughly by quarter 4. Okay, that's modules 1 and 2. Okay, sa quarter 4. Alright, and bakit tayo nagkakaroon ng mga giant trees like the sequoia? You have your giant na sequoia natin, mga redwoods. Okay, so in California, so they can grow because of transpiration. Transpiration is actually helped along because of the hydrogen bonding that makes cohesion and adhesion, and we have the term capillary action possible sa inyong plants. Alright? So you have also here this one, adhesion. So adhesion and cohesion actually works well here. Sa ibang mga plants, di ba napapansin ninyo, they have here the waxy na material that actually, napapansin niyo kapag may mag-drop sa kanila, it's mag-form siya ng parang dewy or parang concave na discs yung water. It's because waxy na cuticles class in plants, in leaves of the plants, actually prevent them from desiccation. The term desiccation is drying out under the heat of the sun. So, para hindi masyado mag-open, 'di ba, nagko-close si stomata during very mainit na panahon. Ino-close yan si stomata to prevent more water loss. But to prevent more pa, may second pa yan siya na barrier si plant. So, meron tayo yung waxy na cuticle natin. Usually, ceramides ang ginagamit na compounds ni plant for that. And yan ang hina-harvest natin na oils, ini-extract natin na oils from the plants. Okay, so that's very useful because to prevent the desiccation of your plant, mag-dry out siya under the sun. And kaya siya mag-form ng spherical na shape, it's because of surface tension. Ginagamit din yan ng water strider, because it strides above the surface of the water. Yung insect na lumalakad sa tubig, that's the water strider. It uses surface tension actually to walk on water. So may Jesus moment siya doon. All right. So you have here the capillary action. Capillary action is actually made possible by hydrogen bonding through the action of through the properties of your, manifested by properties of your adhesion and cohesion. Okay. So the next one is we have your surface moisturizer. Aside from lubricant, seawater is ginagamit natin as a moisturizer. Pinaka-evident niyan, class, is nasa inyong capillaries. It's watery siya. It's because si water kasi, remember, di ba, attracted sa kanya yung ions, carbon dioxide and oxygen molecules actually dissociates and bonds with water by hydrogen bonding inside your capillaries. Useful yan siya, yung pagiging wet ng inyong capillaries. They are soaked in water. Pero extreme din na water, like in the conditions of your, like you have COVID-19, that's extreme na mucus, that's not helpful anymore. Kasi hindi na yun siya water na it's very sticky na, and that the movement of the molecules are actually impeded na siya sa sobrang sticky niya. Okay? And we have the last one, next one, we have the ones that we use to moisten our eyes. That's why we need to blink frequently. Okay? Para hindi mag-dry ang ating eyes. So we have the lacrimal glands that secrete the water na water na substance, watery substance that actually helps to lubricate our eyes para to protect our eyes, especially the sclera na part. Okay? So it is moistened by water. So this discussion here, ito siya. I will be discussing it sa mga this one. I-discuss ko na ito sa inyo sa additional na topic for students who will be taking up medical related degrees. Okay? So mag-start tayo sa carbon and functional groups. Ang functional groups na i-memorize lang ng mga groups ng students na hindi biology na majors in college is yung nasa modules nyo lang. Alright? Do you have any questions? Meron bang questions ng lahat? Hello? Buhay pa ba ang mga estudyante ko? I took myself out. Alright, buhay pa bang lahat? Okay, we can turn on our camera and our microphones. Okay, sino bang may questions dyan? Does anyone have any
Ma'am.
questions? Yes?
Ma'am, paano kayo malaman if non-polar or polar ang isa ka structure?
Okay, malaman mo na polar ang isang structure kapag it will have a positive or negative charge or a slightly positive or negative charge. The original one, like the functional group is acidic or basic that will have a positive or negative charge. So sila yung most likely to form polar compounds. So most of the time yung carboxyls ninyo, the carboxylic acid, COOH, or carboxyl, COO, yan siya ang nagpo-form ng inyong um, mostly negative yan sila eh. They are charged na particles. So they can form polar compounds. Si alcohol din ninyo, OH, which is hydroxides, negatively charged yan siya na compound. It's a negatively charged na compound. So ang ibig sabihin, it will form polar compounds din. Okay?
Yes.
Sa non-polar kasi class, mapapansin ninyo, it's usually the hydrocarbons. Yung pure hydrocarbons lang siya. Like carbon, hydrogen, wala nang iba. That's the most common in nature na non-polars. Yes? Nitrogen pala class is maka-form din siya ng polar na substances or compounds. Yan siya ang pinaka-common kasi in nature. Well, we will have lesson for that sa mga mag-biomolecules na topic. Okay? Any questions? Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you po, ma'am. That's all po.
Okay, thank you then for raising the question. Any questions? Other questions? May iba pa ba? Hello? Gising pa ba lahat na natulog na? Ginawa niyo pampatulog ang boses ko. Other questions? Meron pa ba? Regarding yung mga students for those who will be in yung sa ating face-to-face na classes, we will still have a separate na lecture na pa rin kayo. But you will have the activities. Meron kasi kayong sheets. I'm still preparing it na sheets. Meron kayong sheets for seat works na gagawin natin inside the class. Lahat naman kasi ng rooms has smart TV. So madali lang mag-lecture tayo and mag-activity tayo. Pero ang first natin na lesson kasi on Monday, which is the first day for face-to-face, is ang first natin na lesson is laboratory na rules and familiarization of the parts of the microscope before we will have the lesson on the microscope, yung talagang pupunta na tayo ng laboratory. Please prepare, yung sinabi ko na mag-prepare ng laboratory gowns. Kapag mag-ano na tayo ng yung may experiment na tayo, yung lab na experiment which is on module 3. Mag-lesson pa tayo niyan para sa module 3 but I'll be recording that na lang kasi kulang tayo ng oras. Bad na kasi yung more than 2 hours na lesson. Okay? May other ba na questions? Wala kayong itatanong? Wala na? Okay, so I'll be leaving you today kasi I'll be going to school na naman kasi kukunin ko yung mga late na nasubmit. And mag-check pa ako, magre-record and magpapasok ng grado. Alright, so nag-ready na ako ng keyboard para sa inyong mga grado. Okay, ng number keypad para lang makatype ko ng mabilis para sa grades. Ma-generate ko siya. So I'll be contacting those who will have grades below 85. So kita-kits na lang tayo sa Messenger, yung mga may grades na 85 and below. So you will need to have you have to comply something na like kailangan may submit kayo na isang output siguro or something para to compensate for the grade, para aakyat pa ang grado niyo kung ayaw niyo ng ganung kaliit na grado. Okay, most likely kasi parang may 70 kayo. Iwan ko lang kasi may iba pang hindi nakakompleto. Alright? So as promised, you will have +5 for all those who have completed their requirements for quarter 1. So tandaan yun ha, sa quarter 2, the same pa rin na rule. For quarter 2, the first na task ninyo is nasa page 6 of your module. May makita ba? Sorry, wala siyang makita. Sorry, hindi tayo nakamakbook. So, meron tayo yung photosynthetic pigments na laboratory report. So, you have here page 6 sa inyong module, sa module 3. So, that's part of your inyong gagawin na laboratory. But I'll be sending, kasi hopefully record ako ngayong gabi, so you will have a copy of the lecture for that na entire na lesson by tomorrow. Sana nga. Okay, maganda lang sana ang palibot para makarecord tayo. Okay? So I'll see you next time. So the see you next time is sana hopefully nasa na tayo, hindi na tayo sa mga classes lang, magkita-kita kits tayo sa classroom sa Monday. For groups 1 to 3, morning session, and you have the afternoon session 4 to 6. Then another week na naman yung ibang groups like the 7 to 11. Alright, so we'll be sending you the schedules later this week. Antayin nyo lang sa inyong mga class group chats. Kasi yung mga advisors ang mag-update sa inyong lahat. Alright? So, good day class, and have a nice day today. You can PM me for clarifications regarding the laboratory work. Para sa mga mag-face-to-face, please prepare the materials that you will need for the laboratory work. Dapat ready na siya para diretso tayo set up. By the time that I will call, I will ask you to bring them by next week sa mga groups 1 to 3 sa ating face-to-face. Alright? So, good day and God bless. Stay safe everyone ha, kasi hindi kasyo naka-vaccinated kayo, hindi kayo safe. So may Omicron na kasi. That's twice as more mga mutations than the Delta variant. So we'll have that lesson in quarter 4. Okay? So good day and God bless. So I'll be ending this call and this meeting na so I can go to school na. All right? Good day. Thank you.
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
class.
Good day po, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye po.
Good day, ma'am. Thank you po.
Ma'am, good day po. Good day po.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good day. Okay. I'll stop the recording na.